Hi, welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, from the Gulf oil spill to the Clearfield oil blowout, natural gas blowout, the environment is in the news. John Hanger, the Secretary of the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, will provide some analysis. And then the ongoing controversy over how we select judges in the state of Pennsylvania. Lynn Marks from Pennsylvanians for a Modern Court will weigh in on that subject. Pennsylvania government and politics, in depth and in detail. And guess what? It all starts right now.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Hi, welcome back. Well, John Hanger, who is often on the show, is here. He's got perhaps one of the most important jobs in the Commonwealth. He heads the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. Well, Secretary Hanger, look, I'm not going to ask you to explain the Gulf oil spill, okay? I'm going to confine you to Pennsylvania. We've had enough analysis. But I'll tell you, this natural gas, help me out. It wasn't an explosion. A lot of that was mischaracterized in the press. You call it a blowout, a well blowout. Right, in Clearfield County. It was in the news, and then it was handled pretty quickly. Right. Explain. What's the deal? What happened?
There was a blowout in Clearfield County on June 3rd, approximately 6:45 p.m. It was a dangerous situation, and fortunately, nobody was injured. Mm-hmm. There was no property damage, and there was not, quote-unquote, an explosion. What did occur was a great deal of gas was leaving the well in a completely uncontrolled manner, and also frac fluid was blowing out of the well to a height of approximately 75 feet.
So it was gushing. It
was gushing. That's a good word.
For our viewers, frac is that deep well technique where you put water and it drills down into the shale. Well, go ahead, explain that.
Yeah, the fracking is a word to describe pushing down or injecting water with mixed with chemicals deep underground to the shale, which holds the gas, and the frac fluids break open the shale to free the gas so that it can, in fact, come up the well in a controlled manner, not in a blowout manner.
You got it.
And get into a pipe and then be used in markets across the country, and right here in Pennsylvania too. But what happened on June 3rd, of course, it was completely uncontrolled. It was a very dangerous situation. Mm-hmm. We have done, we're in the middle of a full investigation of the company that was involved. In fact, there were two companies involved. EOG is the drilling company there that owns the well and has prime responsibility, but they also had a contractor at site who had a lot of workers there called CC Forbes. And we're looking at the drilling part of the operation, we're looking at the fracking part of the operation, and we're also looking at what they call in the business the completion of the well. And they were actually completing the well when they lost control.
What's that mean, completing it?
The drilling of this well was actually done from January to March of this year.
Oh, so it's a new well. It's not an old well.
No, you're right. It's not yet producing.
Oh, okay.
And they were in the process of developing the well.
They're getting down to where the natural gas is. That's your point?
Right.
Yeah.
So they were finishing up the work so that they could get the well connected to pipes and bring the gas to market. They were sort of at the end of the development process. We, of course, are very concerned whenever there's an event like that. Somebody could have been killed. Somebody could have easily been injured. And there was some damage to the environment as a result of frac fluids escaping the site. Quite a bit of that damage was limited by digging trenches and getting some pumps in to prevent the water from doing as much damage as it would have otherwise done.
Yeah. Now, the well is the well in public or private lands?
This is in private lands.
So it's not in the public lands that have been opened up within the last year or so. Go ahead.
No, it was owned by a hunting club. It borders a state forest, but it's actually not part of the state forest. It's in a very remote area. The public is concerned, obviously, about making sure that the well drilling is done in a manner that doesn't pollute water, that doesn't endanger lives or property, and this industry has got to do a better job.
Now, one of the debates that, over the Marcellus Shale, we're not going to get into the taxation stuff with you, but we're going to stick to the environmental stuff, is your department been given the resources to expand the oversight, to hire more people, because Marcellus Shale, we're sitting on this huge formation of natural gas that covers perhaps as much as 2/3. That's probably an exaggeration of the state. Everybody's sort of looking at it, job producer, natural gas, cleaner and safer, I think, than oil. How do you think your department sits at the moment to provide the oversight that I know you and Governor Rendell have talked about over the past year especially?
Absolutely. The governor has directed the department to hire more people. We've, in fact, by the end of this year, we'll have more than doubled our gas staff. We've hired 37 additional gas staff in 2009, and right now, this year, we're in the process of hiring another 68. We've opened 2 new offices so we can position that staff closer to some of the new drilling areas. We are absolutely in agreement that the government has an essential role here, and it must have strong oversight with strong rules.
Now, go ahead.
I do want to say, in case of EOG, we shut them down when this occurred. We stopped them drilling, we stopped them from fracking, and they still cannot frack. And we also stopped them from completing wells.
Fracking, that somehow, okay. We got it. You got it out there. The Secretary's smiling, frickin' frack. We'll get that. But this is important. Look,
don't get me in trouble.
No, I'm not going to get you in trouble. Look, we're going to go to a break. I want to talk about alternative energy portfolio standards. That's a big term. You'll explain it. But at the moment, the leases on public lands has been halted. Is that correct? Particularly in state forest.
The governor has concluded that there's been enough leasing done on lands. And
public lands.
Public lands.
Okay.
And Secretary Quigley has strongly recommended, and the governor's accepted that recommendation. The governor supports a bill that has cleared the House that would make that moratorium on public lands.
And there's some who would extend it to wall drilling in the state. There's debate in the legislature about that, and we'll see where all that goes, right?
Right. And I think one of the things that industry needs to pay attention to is we've got to get this industry to actually follow these good rules that we now have in place, or soon will have in place. If they don't, they are going to lose the confidence of the people of Pennsylvania.
Okay, alternative energy, it's in the news, and it'll be our topic with Secretary Hanger when Pennsylvania Newsmakers returns.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania Cyber Charter School, bringing educational innovation and freedom to the children of Pennsylvania. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by PAConstructionJobs.com. For more information about rewarding careers in the highway construction industry, visit PAConstructionJobs.com. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Welcome back to the program with the Secretary of the Department of Environmental Resources. I almost said DEP, the Environmental Protection Resource. It's all the same. You're here to do your job. John Hanger. All right, let's talk about these energy independence goals. I guess that's the way it actually legal. It's not just a goal. They're in a law, and there's a requirement, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, by 2021 that we draw that electricity sold at retail be, 8% from renewable sources. Yeah. So talk a little bit, first of all, what does all that mean? Explain that in language for our viewers.
Well, in 2004, the legislature passed a bill that required over basically a 15-year period from, say, 2004 to roughly 2020, that 8% of all of our electricity come from alternative energy sources and renewables. And there was another, I don't want to complicate this, but there was another 10% requirement for different technologies. But it was 8% for renewables. There's a bill now in the House. It's cleared the committee, House Bill 2405, and Governor Rendell and others are strongly urging the House to pass this bill as soon as possible. That would raise the 8% requirement to 15%. And it's very, very important for our economy. We've now got thousands of jobs in Pennsylvania in the wind industry, 4,000 people.
So let me stop you and make sure. I want to make sure our viewers got this. So right now, most of the electricity in our state is generated from coal-based sources or nuclear. Am I right or wrong about that?
Yeah, about 45% coal and about 35%, 40% nuclear.
So I'm basically right. Coal. So your point is, and the law requires that by 2021, 8% of that energy will be produced by these alternatives.
Right.
Now, what are the? Go through the alternatives for us again.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
it's the bill that we're supporting would raise the 8% to 15%.
Okay, 8% to 15%.
And
but now
it would be
it's
for
biogas,
what we call biomass, using wood and other things to make electricity, solar, wind, hydro.
You mean even hydropower? You mean, now let me make sure I understand this. So let's say we're at the Susquehanna River, or we're at, and you put up a dam and you can produce electricity in that way. Is that okay?
If it is what's called basically fish friendly. There's standards
Oh, you got to make
make
sure that the fish can get up and
right. And in fact, PPL is building a new dam. Well, it's not a new dam. They're expanding an existing dam to get more power out of it, and they're making it more fish friendly, and that will qualify for part of this requirement.
Now, in our state, of all these alternatives, and I know you're not going to, you may want to not answer this directly, and I understand why. Is there one or more of these alternatives that you think, I don't want you to pick winners and losers, but you know what I mean, that given, I mean, we don't have sun, you know, it's not, 9 months out of the year in quite the same way that it is in other states. But wind, some places we have more wind. Is there some?
Well, let me walk you through very quickly. Certainly, solar is a viable resource here in Pennsylvania. Believe it or not, you get solar power from those panels when it's raining. You get you don't get as much as when it's really sunny.
Okay.
But you do get some production. And actually, there are countries like Germany and which are further north and have less solar. So it's a viable resource here.
I got it.
Wind is a big industry already in Pennsylvania. 4,000 people working today, Terry, in the wind industry right here in Pennsylvania, and we have 16 wind farms running right now. They're producing enough power for about 250,000 homes. That part of the business will grow. Hydro, we've talked about. There's some opportunities there. One that I'm very excited about is on the farm, using, frankly, manure and gas.
And we need to keep it out of the streams and flowing into the Chesapeake. That's another issue.
And that's big for Pennsylvania because we have a large agriculture community. We have a lot of natural resources here that produce virtually no pollution and also create jobs. And all that new power, and this is a very important last point, all that new power is real electricity, and more supply lowers prices.
Last question before I let you go. How are the energy suppliers taking to this? I mean, are they looking at it and diversifying? Go ahead.
Well, we're on track with the existing law. We're meeting the requirements. In fact, in some cases, we're ahead of the requirements. Other states have raised the requirements much higher, and there are a lot of companies now that I think are getting with the program. A few are still fighting the future. Okay.
All right, there you have it. John Hanger, the Secretary of the Department of Environmental Resources, providing us with an update. All right, the ongoing controversy, how we pick judges in this state. We're one of 6 states, just 6, that elects all of its judges at all levels. Should we continue to do that? Lynn Marks from Pennsylvanians for a Modern Court will weigh in on that subject following, guess what, some commercial announcements.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the State System of Higher Education. 14 state-owned universities. The state system is the largest provider of higher education in Pennsylvania. And by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Well, Lynn Marks, he's the Executive Director of the Pennsylvanians for Modern Court, is on hand. She's probably the leading reformer of court reform in the state. You don't mind if I say that, the leading reformer? You kind of like that.
Yeah, I don't mind
you
that.
like that. That's pretty
good. That's a good way to start.
Well, look, there's been a huge controversy in Pennsylvania for some time. There's momentum now to do something about the way in which we elect judges. We're one of only 6 states. We elect them from district magistrate the whole way to the top, to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. All right, Lynn, let's talk a little. Let's talk about the courts. Why we elect all these people? You think we should not elect at least the appeals court. Talk a little bit about why we elect them and what goes on in those elections that you don't like.
Okay. Well, we've been electing judges in Pennsylvania. These are state court judges since the 1850s, and there have been attempts to go back to a different kind of system for many years. The problems that we see with electing judges, the biggest problem, it's the money. In order to win, and here we're talking about the state appellate judges, so that's the Supreme, Superior, and Commonwealth Court.
Right.
This 31.
Not the local judges. They're not talking about those.
We're not talking
Get that out of the way.
We're not talking about changing the system there. But the problems with electing judges is, in order to win, they have to get their names out there. They need to have campaign ads. They need a campaign committee. And where does that money come from? The money comes from lawyers and interest groups who often appear in court. And that's the biggest problem. Just think of yourself in court, and then you start wondering, gee, I wonder if Terry made a large contribution to one of those judges.
You probably know, if you're a sitting appeals court judge, whether someone has given you, and you can give anything you want, right?
Well, there are no limits. There are no limits in Pennsylvania. So I'm sitting there thinking, gee, I wonder if Terry made a large contribution to the judge. And then I think, gee, I wonder if Terry's lawyer made a large contribution. And then I think, gee, I hope my lawyer made a large contribution to the judge. I mean, I shouldn't even be thinking of that when I'm in a court of justice.
And more because we're talking about statewide campaigns, the amount of money has ratcheted up significantly. I think something like $4 million in the last Supreme Court race. You'll correct me if I'm wrong. Most of it, or a good portion of it, from lawyers who potentially could appear before these very judges. Is that your big point?
Yeah, I mean, the last race, you're right, in 2009, the 2 candidates raised $4.7 million. That includes in kind. And even both of those candidates said, no wonder, and they use this, justice is for sale. And it's not just hypothetical that lawyers or interest groups or other entities might appear in court. There was a study done by the American Judicial Society a couple of months ago that said that in 60% of the cases before the state Supreme Court, a lawyer or a litigant or a party made a contribution to one of those justices, and in fact nearly a third made a contribution to a majority of those justices. And I'm not blaming the justices.
Sure.
We're not blaming the judges. But in order to win, unless you're independently wealthy, you've got to raise money.
And before we talk about the alternative system, another problem is that now, because of a Supreme Court case a few years ago, judicial candidates are permitted, let's be honest, pretty much to do what they want, say what they want, First Amendment situation. And even though there's a judicial bar or canon against it, talking about things that might potentially come before them as a jurist, our judicial campaigns are starting to look like regular political campaigns, with positions sometimes being taken by judicial candidates. And in other words, they're beginning to look like the ugly business of normal politics in this state. Yes, no?
Well, it does. They are getting to look more like the other, like executive and legislative races. And so the important part to remember, because people say, hey, all officials are elected, is that the role of a judge is very different from the role of a senator or a governor or a legislator.
Yep.
I mean, those officials they run on platforms. They take positions, and that's why we vote for them. That's why we don't vote for them. But the role of a judge is to make a decision in an individual case based on the facts and the law, and not according to what they said on the campaign trail, and not according to what their contributors. So it's a very different role, and people have to keep coming back to that.
All right, we're talking with Lynn Marks. There's an alternative to this. It's called a merit selection system. Maybe that's not the correct word, but we'll find out from Lynn Marks what is the correct term following these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care.
Hi, welcome back to the program. I'm talking with Lynn Marks. She's the Executive Director of Pennsylvanians for a Modern Court, and there's a growing support for changing the way in which we select judges. In fact, they conducted a poll that showed a majority of Pennsylvanians now support going to an alternative system, which would be, what's the alternative system you all want?
Well, what we want, and what, as you say, a growing coalition of civic and good government and legal and business and religious groups support replacing the way that we select our statewide appellate court judges with a system which is it's a hybrid. It's a kind of an appointive process, but it also has a nonpartisan retention election. Mm-hmm. So there are a number of steps. There would be a broad-based citizen nominating commission that would screen and evaluate candidates according to criteria. Now there are no criteria at all to be a judge, except for to be a lawyer. And the commission gives a small list to the governor. The governor must select somebody from that list. From that list. Yeah, not anybody the governor wants, but from that list of qualified people. A name goes over to the Senate. After Senate confirmation, an appellate court judge would then sit for an initial term of 4 years. And then after 4 years, that person sits in a nonpartisan election, so we say yes or no, that judge should stay for a full 10-year term.
All right, it might not take politics completely out of it, and we're not going to be that naive, but A, it would ensure that the person have the requisite qualifications other than just be able to raise some money and run a statewide campaign. Number two, there'd be steps along the way for evaluation by the governor and then by the Senate, right? And then ultimately the voters at some point would put their stamp of approval on after a period of time. Does that?
Well, yeah. I mean, of course, there are going to be politics, and there are politics in everything. But the important thing, as you say, it's designed to get the most qualified, fair, and impartial judges, and it gets judges out of the fundraising business. It gets money out of the courtroom, and it's going to. And our goal is to break the perception, and our poll confirms that. Is that judicial decision making is based on who they got money from, and that's very disconcerting, in a system of justice, that people should think at all that they're not getting a fair shake. That's all we're asking for, is for citizens to feel like they're getting a fair shake in court.
All right, I want to thank you for coming in. We haven't done much on this about judicial elections in the past. We'll do some more. All right, and as always, thanks for watching Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and you all stay well.